My story begins where I'm from, which is Mississippi. I grew up in a small town, Hernando, Mississippi. I'm one of 9 kids. We always laugh. My mom was an only child, but she ended up having 9 kids. She said she felt lonely as a child. And like most of Mississippi, it was a rural community, about 15 miles outside of Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee. But it was very rural, grew up on a farm. We did all the normal farming things. And after working on a farm, I decided farming was not for me. So I wanted to go to college and become something college educated that would allow me to do something other than farm work.
Were you ever the kid in class who said, like most kids, I'm going to be the president?
No, I was never that kid. I knew some of those kids, but that was never me. I didn't have those kind of grand ambitions.
Okay.
I knew I wanted to do something involving education to get out of the poverty of Mississippi. I didn't want to continue in that lifestyle. And fairly early on, I decided I wanted to become a lawyer. I didn't really know any lawyers. I saw Perry Mason on TV, but I didn't know any black lawyers. I saw a few white lawyers around the town. At least saw their offices. I never saw them. I wouldn't have recognized them. But I had an idea based on knowing who Thurgood Marshall was, that lawyers do good things and lawyers help people and lawyers are the way you help people rise up. And I wanted to be one of those people, lawyer who help people.
Now, as you said that you graduated from Mississippi State University and the University of Texas School of Law, was the competition to land a job, was it fierce, or is it something that you start working on while you are in law school?
I think you start working on it while you're in law school, and it kind of depends on what kind of job you want. The toughest competition, I think, are the ones that pay the top amounts. It's those big law firm jobs that pay so much that people are competing for. But there are plenty of jobs out there that are, I think, fulfilling, that there's not as much competition for. But I think I found it so much in life that it's often who you know that can help you get a job. And a lot of law school is about establishing relationships. And once you do that, it makes it getting your foot in the door for getting a job a lot easier.
Now, how do you decide defense or prosecution? How did you decide?
Well, in my thinking about it, especially when I was in law school, I wasn't thinking about defense or prosecution. I never thought about doing any kind of criminal law work. What I really wanted to be in life was to be a legal aid lawyer. Because the legal aid lawyer goes back to my ideas about Thurgood Marshall. They help people, especially poor people and underrepresented people. And that's all I wanted to do. But after I graduated from law school, there weren't many legal aid jobs out there. This was coming to the end of the Reagan years, and so many jobs in social services had been cut. So when I applied at legal aid, they weren't hiring anybody to do that kind of work. So when I was in law school, I never gave any thought to becoming a prosecutor. That was the last thing I would have thought I would end up doing. Because growing up in Mississippi, I think we saw the criminal justice system in general, but especially the law enforcement part of it, as being something that worked against black people. So I never thought I'd be one of those on that side working against black people. But later on, I had a different view about what prosecutors actually did.
Okay. So as I previously said, you've tried over 200 cases during your time as an assistant district attorney, many of them high-profile cases. Just to name a few: Tom DeLay, former U.S. House Majority Leader, convicted of money laundering; Celeste Beard, convicted of murdering her husband. Most recently, Brandon Daniel, who was sentenced to death for murder of the Austin police officer Jamie Padron. Do you prefer high-profile cases?
I think I perform best as a lawyer with difficult cases. And although each of those cases was very high profile, they were all extremely difficult cases. Most of those cases you named, people were surprised by the result we got in the case. They may not have been surprised in the Jaime Padron case that we got a guilty because there was strong evidence, but very few people thought that we would have a Travis County jury that would give the death penalty under the circumstances of that case. So I tend to gravitate toward, or maybe those tough cases gravitate toward me because I do a good job of handling them. And one of the cases you didn't mention was one involving a young lady who turned up missing named Julianne Gonzalez. And it was a case where a body was never found. People aren't lining up to try those kind of cases from a prosecutor's perspective because they're very difficult. But I was willing to take that case and try that case.
It was I was gonna ask you about that case because I knew that, you know, that's just one of the cases that, you know, people will probably shy away from. And then you mentioned it, one thing I was gonna ask you about that is it, in that particular case, because her body wasn't found and he was sentenced to life, is that correct?
Yes.
In that case, was that because you knew that case was a challenge, was that like a thrill of a challenge or just your sheer confidence in yourself?
Well, I mean, I certainly have confidence in myself. I know how to do this job. I've had a lot of practice at doing it. I'm comfortable talking to jurors and getting them to see a case, and I do a good job of laying out a case and working with my co-counsel to present a thorough case. But I do take it as a challenge in a case like that. A challenge because it matters to the parents of a child who's been murdered or who's gone missing like she did under those circumstances. And I know how important it is to them to feel like the criminal justice system works for them, that there's somebody who cares, who sees and feels to some extent the pain that they feel. So because of that, it means a lot to me. So I don't want to be the one who let this person who we know murdered their daughter get away with it because he was clever enough to hide the body. And that, to me, that's just not fair. And so he needs to be punished fully for that. So it's a challenge to get that done because it's a difficult case. But the satisfaction comes in knowing that these parents are going to be not happy, because nothing's going to make them happy after losing their child, but that they will feel some satisfaction that he didn't get away with it, that they got some closure, as much closure as you can get under those circumstances.
Now, with that said, after a conviction, do you ever think, you know, did I get this right? Because, you know, of course, you never want to send an innocent person
Right.
to prison. Do you ever think sometimes, like, you know, did I get this right?
Well, before I ever start prosecuting someone, before I take them to trial, I have to be convinced in my mind, beyond any doubt, that this is the person who's done it. And if I'm not convinced of that, I don't proceed with the case. I dismiss the case.
Okay.
But even after that, if I have anything that causes me to have doubt, I'll review the case and see if there's anything legitimate that's been brought up later that would suggest we got the wrong person.
What is one of the issues you really want to tackle should you become district attorney?
Well, I think one of the main issues is the issue of mass incarceration. That hits home to me because it affects so much of the African American community. It affects our general society, but it's really directed toward the African American community, where you have so many young men and boys who are arrested, convicted, and imprisoned on nonviolent offenses. Most of the cases we send people to prison on are for drug cases. And people who are using drugs are people who have a drug problem. They don't necessarily have a crime problem. Some people who use drugs commit crime, but that's not the usual. But we've sent so many of our young men and boys to prison, it ruins their lives, it ruins their families, it ruins their communities. And it's a waste of human resources. It's also a waste of financial resources. Sending someone to prison who has a cocaine habit or a heroin habit is not going to cure the habit. And it's not going to make them a better person by sending them to prison. If anything, it'll make them a better criminal. And that's not what we need to do. So as a district attorney, I want to make sure our resources are being used to go after people who would hurt us, the murderers, the rapists, the robbers, and not after people who we just are afraid of because they don't look like we think polite society looks. And I think that's what we see a lot. And I think the only way you make those changes is being inside something like a district attorney's office.
Now, as with all campaigns, there's a lot, you know, there's going to be some mudslinging, and attorneys Rick Reed and Margaret Moore, who are both campaigning to be the next district attorney, have said one of the reasons they're running is to restore integrity in the DA's office. What is your response to this?
Well, we already have integrity in the DA's office, and you know, you got to clean your own home before you can go clean someone else's home. And I think they would be well served to look inside things that they have done and ways that they have acted, including during the campaign before they are critical of an entire office. I think every office can use something to help it get better. New leadership is good sometimes, and that's why maybe all of us are running, because we think we're the right kind of good leadership. But I think what you notice with their campaigns is their campaigns have very little to do with any ideas about how to make the office better or how to make our community better. And when we try to engage them in those conversations, they tend to talk about things totally unrelated to that.
Now, if you win the office, can you work with the men and women who have sided with your opponents?
Oh, absolutely. That'll be easy to do. Really, because you got to put aside differences, and I've always been able to do that in past cases and past jobs. Put aside differences you may have and be able to work together for the common good. And ultimately, anybody who's willing to work together to make the criminal justice system fairer and more equitable for everybody, especially for the community that's been underrepresented in the criminal justice system as far as the prosecution part of it and being treated fairly, anybody who wants to make that system better, I'm ready to work with them.
Okay. Now, do the personal attacks, do they affect who endorses you?
I think for some people who don't know me and they're willing to listen to those personal attacks and not find out about me, it'll affect them. But I've been in this community for a while, and I think my 25 years of work speaks eloquently for itself. So if anybody wants to know what kind of prosecutor I am or what kind of DA I will be, that's what they can look at.
Now, what's the key to winning the campaign?
Getting our message out. That's the most important thing. 'Cause what we found is that when people know about us, what kind of campaign we have, know what kind of person I am, then they're ready to vote for us.
Okay. So by all accounts, you are the popular candidate. Does that play a big role in you getting elected?
Oh, certainly, certainly. You want people to feel comfortable with you. You want them to feel like they can know and trust you and they have a sense of your integrity. And I think those things are why I am the popular candidate. It wasn't like I just showed up and said, I want to be the DA, so pick me. I've given them a lifetime of commitment to this job, and I've been training for this job, and they know and have been proud of the work I've done in this office. My opponents say that they read a story in the newspaper and that caused them to want to be the DA. That's not a real big commitment to making the DA's office better or making our community better.
All right. Touchy subject, the death penalty.
Sure.
It's a constant debate. Do you think that a moratorium should be put in place for the death penalty?
I don't think that a moratorium needs to be put in place for the death penalty. Let me first talk about my position on the death penalty personally. Until I started working at the DA's office, after I'd been there a couple of years, that was when I decided that the death penalty should be an option. When I started there, I didn't believe that the death penalty should be used at all. So as an adult, I changed my mind about it because I understood better how the death penalty worked and how it was used only in certain circumstances. Because of that, I think that a community should have that option, because I do believe there are people who are so bad and who have done things so bad that they deserve the death penalty.
So I guess with that said, if you became the next district attorney, would you use the death penalty, although you want it as an option, would you use it sparingly?
Absolutely, I would use it sparingly. Our office has a good system for the way we decide on death penalty cases. We have a committee, a very diverse committee in the office that meets and makes a recommendation based on all the facts and circumstances we can find out about the offense itself, about the background of the accused, if there's any mental health issues, anything that would be mitigating to the person. We look at all of that before we decide if we should seek the death penalty on the case. And it has to be a pretty strong case. Then we make a recommendation to the district attorney, and the district attorney makes that final decision. But it's a very well thought out process. But we know that the Travis County community is not one that wants us to seek the death penalty very often. We're not like Harris County or Dallas County, where they do it on a regular basis. We do it only for the worst of the worst cases. And typically when we seek it, 12 citizens here look at the circumstances and make a decision that leads to the death penalty being enforced.
Okay. Now, you've done a lot, you've accomplished a lot, you've gone through so many things, both personally and professionally. One of the things is that you will be the first African American to hold the position of district attorney in Travis County. Does that matter? Oh,
I think it matters a great deal. It doesn't matter as far as my qualifications. My qualifications are going to be much better than certainly anybody in this race. But I don't know if you could find someone who has my experience and abilities to lead this office out there. So it doesn't matter in that sense. But what it does matter is that I bring a different perspective to being the district attorney, to being someone who makes decisions about who gets prosecuted, what kind of cases in general we're prosecuting, and the quantity and quality of fairness in the community. All of that stems directly from your district attorney. So I think it's important that we look at our history, especially our Southern history, especially how blacks have been treated in the criminal justice system. And I think you look at the opportunity to have someone make those kind of decisions who has a different perspective. It's an unusual thing to have a black man be the district attorney anywhere in the United States. But it's especially unusual thing to have it happen in the South. And then in Texas, it's a rare thing to happen. So it gives a different perspective, and I think it sends a different message to our community about what kind of justice we can expect and what kind of justice we can demand.